Happy Friday, everybody. This is Mike with Mutual Reception Astrology with the Astrology Shitposting Association. I just figured I'd go live a little bit on Friday night, talk a little bit about kind of phases of getting into astrology, open myself to answering a few questions, and just kind of get into it. So, yeah, I'll invite a couple people really quick. Doop doop. Just go ahead and do this. Do 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 do. Boop. Already going live. Okay, perfect. Yeah. So I'm gonna write a message in here. And welcome to my live broadcast. Please ask questions and interact. Okay, so anyhow, it's been kind of a long week, but I am awake and ready to get into this. So last weekend, we actually had our first regional meetup in Olympia, Washington. That is the state capital of Washington State. Which, for those of you that are not from America, that's the top northwest corner of the U.S. It's where Seattle is. It's where Starbucks started. Microsoft lives here. This particular Drunkstrology is brought to you by Triple by New Belgium. It's not really brought to you by Triple, but I'm going to drink some. So I did want to say a couple of things. Some interesting things have happened in the astrology shitposting world. We had our first regional meetup. We had it in Olympia, Washington. I'm hoping more regional meetups happen wherever people are. Obviously, I can't go to all of them because my liver would die. But also because, I work a lot during the week. And I just can't go everywhere. Seattle is not the capital of Washington, Zach. It's just not. So we had our meetup. We went to several bars and drank a lot. We didn't talk that much about astrology, but we did, talk shit about some people, so that kind of counts. We talked a little bit about astrology. It was Nicholas Honradi and as Naomi and Kirsten and Kate were there. So that was the fullness of the people that showed up. And it was a really good time. We don't always do those. In fact, that was the first of hopefully many to come. We ended up doing it on Imbolc, which is also known as Groundhog's Day. So we did it on one of the high holy days of the year and got shit-faced during it. So it felt wonderful. I sang War Pigs, and I'm sure the footage is somewhere out there, unfortunately. It's pretty good beer. So, some other news to catch you up on what's happening in the shitposting world. I recently found out that I might get a beer sponsor for Drunkstrology, so I'm pretty excited about that. It is a beer company from Scotland, and they're going to be sending me beer in the mail, I think. And then I'll put that beer in my fridge, and then I'll get on live and talk about the beer and drink. So, yeah, that's going to be the case. Why do you hate being British, Chloe? I want to talk about astrology, so kind of how people get into it, and kind of what the kind of layers and levels are. So often the first thing that people get into with astrology is sun sign astrology. Sun sign astrology is the simplest entry point. Most people that are doing astrology in the West, in the English-speaking countries, are doing Western tropical astrology. So tropical astrology is not based on the constellations. It's based on the ingresses. So it's based on spring equinox, autumn equinox, summer solstice, and winter solstice. Those are the cardinal starts of the year. So they start the cardinal sign. So the beginning winter is the beginning Capricorn, the beginning of summer is the beginning Cancer, the beginning of autumn is the beginning of Libra, the beginning of spring is the beginning of Aries. And that is what Western astrology has been based on basically since the beginning. So, based on Western astrology, we fit somewhere in these 12 signs. And those are you're born a certain time during the year, and that is your sun sign. And that is the basis of most of the astrology that people do online because it's the easiest thing to find out. Back in the day, they used to actually put the rising sign was one of the more important signs. It was like rising and sun had kind of equal power, I guess, because persona, the rising, and the sun, the kind of true self, are both pretty important in the world. And people with very dissimilar risings and suns understand that those are two totally different aspects of the self being expressed. I, for example, have Aries rising, Libra sun. So my rising, my persona, is much more combative and more of an asshole than my actual self is. Although, it's arguable maybe Libras are just assholes too. So it could just be the cardinal asshole sense. So most people, when they get into astrology, they're learning sun signs. And they're usually the next step for people is to learn what another person's sun sign is and then start to understand the stereotypes or the archetypes, which are stereotypes, the stereotypes of the different signs. And also understand if they're compatible with that other sign. Because honestly, if you look at astrology objectively, more women are drawn to it than men. And women tend to be more concerned and into relationships than maybe men are. We don't know. Is this a stereotype and an archetype? We're not sure. So anyway, most people get into astrology through sun signs, and then they tend to get into compatibility, but they get into sun sign compatibility. The simplest breakdowns for sun sign compatibility is you tend to be most compatible with sun signs that are in either your same element, because your same element, if you're a Libra, trine that in air is Aquarius, trine that in air the other way is Gemini. And then also fire. So if you're an air sign, fire and air are kind of the compatible elements. And if you think about that elementally, air feeds fire. It makes sense. And then you have earth and water, and those are the compatible elements. Often the opposite is compatible, but problematic, right? So, anyhow, so if you're an earth sign, like you're a Capricorn, trine to you is Virgo, trine to you is Taurus, opposite you is Cancer, and then sextile to your sun is Scorpio and Pisces. So typically, Scorpio, Pisces, Virgo, Taurus are going to be the matches for Capricorn sun. With Cancer kind of being the dark horse, and then the squares being the most difficult, right? So Capricorn Libra and Capricorn Aries relationships would be the most difficult to handle. And this is all just based on sun signs. Obviously, there's a lot more to your chart, but we're talking about how people get into astrology and where they go. So first thing, you learn a little bit about your sun sign, tend to learn about compatibility, and then after that, people start doing the big three. They start to understand that there's more than just their sun sign, right? So the big three is your rising, your sun, and your moon. So your rising is your persona. It's what you project out into the world. Persona matters a lot more in the age of social media, because often the person that you are on social media is your persona. In some cases, there's some argument to be made that it's your MC, your midheaven. But I think that's only maybe if you're a if you're very popular online. I don't know. I think it that kind of really depends on how much of a position you rise to in your internet persona. So, so anyway, so people go from sun sign. This is just generally. I'm talking in stereotypes from sun sign to connections to compatibility to big three. So sun, moon, rising. Your rising is your persona. That's what you project out into the world. Your sun is who you actually kind of are on a core level. And your moon is what's hidden, but it's also a big part of who you are. You can think of moon as your kind of emotional self, sun as your conscious self, and rising as your projected self. That's one way to think about it, but there's a lot of other ways. Some people think of sun as self with a capital S, rising as ego, and then moon as personality. So people learn their big three, right? So that's the next step. So you learn your big three. You start to think a little bit more in terms of, oh, you're not just this 1 out of 12 thing. You're not just this 1 out of 144 thing. You're this 1 out of, 2048 or whatever it is, 144 cubed. I don't know what it is. So, yeah. Feel free to share this in places. So then people get into their big three. So they're learning more about their big three. They're learning, oh, this is why I come across in such a different way. Like somebody will be like, oh, I have a Scorpio rising. That's why people don't trust me at all. Even though I'm a totally trustworthy Taurus, or whatever. Or, I guess my Virgo moon is why I don't connect with being a Sagittarius as much. I feel more like an introvert. People start with their big three to start unlocking aspects of their personality a little bit more. And it's generally at this point that people will dive into their full chart and try to understand their full chart. And when people are first learning their full chart, back in my day, you just had to get lots of books, and a lot of it was crap. And you just had to kind of dig through it. Nowadays, it's a little bit easier because you got the internet. I had the internet, but, when I was, really researching it, there wasn't a whole lot on the internet. So, anyhow, I'm not just crying about how I had to walk uphill both ways in the snow to get my natal. I'm just saying, it's a little bit harder back in the day to find good information. In fact, on the internet, there's a lot of bad information. People have gotten a little bit better at sorting out the good from the bad. So the next step from big three is to learn your full chart. And then with your full chart, you learn all the planets, up to Pluto generally. Nowadays, people learn Chiron a little bit more. I think that's fair, because I think Chiron, if we're being honest, there's a good chance that Chiron and just the asteroids in general rule Virgo, and there's a good chance that Earth itself rules Taurus. So anyhow, insert frog on unicycle pick. So where are we at? We're at the full chart. So people get into their full chart. And generally, in the internet age, it feels like people learn their full chart, they post it, and then they just kind of expect kind of free work on it. So they tend to get pretty shitty interpretation, because most people that really, really learn astrology at the higher level, it's never do something that you're really good at for free is a good adage to go by. So people that are really good at it tend not to give it out for free, because it gets devalued that way. It's just something that's true about astrology. So anyhow, I'm checking the comments every once in a while. I just want people to, I want to make sure that I'm hearing whatever's said, but if I don't catch it, go ahead and type it out again. I wish there was a way to make the comments scroll up the page a little bit more, but I can't really figure out how to do that. So people learn their chart, and honestly, the best way that you're going to learn your chart is by getting books or Googling it. right? If you get books and you Google it, you can just learn a lot more about what it's associated with. You'll probably get waylaid into like numerology about like what your day number means. You might get caught up in like the secret language of birthdays. You might get caught up in like cusps and things like that. And you'll tend to get a pretty good. People get a pretty good astrological education just by researching their chart, because most of us are. I mean, I'm interested in other people too, but the thing that really took me to the next step was trying to understand the weird ass personality and person that I was. And then as I learned more about astrology, realizing that those qualities resonated with me were what made it seem kind of an appropriate thing to try to get deeper on. So people learn sun signs, they learn compatibility, they tend to learn big three, then they tend to get into their chart. And when they first get into their chart, they tend to just learn like, oh, I have all these things in different signs. Although, a lot of people that were born during, I think it was that 89 period, have a lot of Capricorn, so they tend to be really focused in one part of their chart. So other generations did not have that big clusterfuck in one sign, which a lot of people do. I know Naomi is one of the people that has the huge Capricorn cluster, and a lot of the people that are actually on our page have that because it was a generational thing where they had Uranus, Saturn, what was it? Uranus, Saturn, and Neptune all in Capricorn, as long as whatever personal planets they might have had. So people get into their own chart. They start to learn about that all the planets are in different signs. They also start to learn that some are better than others. So you start to learn that there's a bad rap with some, especially when you kind of get into the social aspect of astrology. And you start to learn that there's things like fall and there's things like exalted. Some planets do better in other signs than others, right? So Mars, for example, does really well in Capricorn. Mars does really well in Capricorn because the Capricorn energy allows Mars, that energy that's going out into the world to do things, to be very fruitful, but it also limits it so it doesn't get the person that has it in too much trouble. Mars in Capricorn is good. My kid is crying. But I think my wife's on it, so it's good. Then you have... and then people find out that natal astrology is kind of... Yeah, that just looking at the charts... Honestly, it depends on who you are. So some people from this point, you can branch out in a lot of different directions. Some people go really deep into the natal. They start to learn about aspects. They start to learn about domiciles. They start to really learn how to break apart a natal chart. Honestly, the way that I went is I was very interested in learning, trying to get as much information about other people as I could. So I would just study different people's natal charts and then kind of interact with them and see how they were, to get kind of the, psychological profile of all the different positions. That's kind of what I did with it, but not everybody goes that direction. Some people go more into, they start to realize that there's so many different branches to it. So there's synastry, which is like, how do two charts connect with each other? And if your sun is in somebody else's fifth house, that means that you're going to be vitalizing energy on their creativity. It's like a pretty positive relationship that you're probably going to have with that person, right? If you learn that you have a Venus square Mars with a person, you might realize that you're going to have and you're in a relationship, you might realize it's just going to be tempestuous. There's no way to really get around that. So people get into natal. From natal, they branch out. And one of the interesting ways to branch out is to learn transit astrology. So one of the things that people learn generally is that There's global transits. There's things that are happening all the time around us. And the global transits are kind of the flavor of the energy of the time that we're in, right? So if you follow global transits, you can use that for predictive astrology. You can use that to kind of guess out what's going to be happening on the big scales. So nothing super surprising on that level. You know from certain transits when big things are going to be happening, so you're not as caught by surprise by things. And you can also take advantage of certain energies if you can kind of map them well enough. The other things that people do, it wasn't incestuous. I think I said tempestuous. Yeah. The other thing that people learn to do is progressions, where you progress your chart forward through time. The other thing that people learn to do is solar returns. Other things that people learn to do is their transits. Transits, I think, kind of almost the arriving to at least beyond a beginner sense of astrology is really understanding Saturn return by the lived experience of it. I think that tends to be when people are most like they kind of mature in it. Before that, people tend to be a little bit more it's more theoretical. Saturn return tends to make astrology pretty real and concrete for people. It also sometimes tends to give people a better understanding of like the difference between expansive and contractive, like conservative, liberal, like the kind of dualities of the world, and how all of them exist for a reason, you know? And it hopefully Saturn takes you a little bit away from judgment of everybody else and more into a place where you're trying to understand everybody else and you're trying to understand cycles of history, because it's best to just understand the cycles of history that you're in and align yourself with them. At least that's my perspective. So the good thing about the astrology shitposting groups is it's going to get people started on big three. Already, most people more and more people are understanding big three astrology. Like, I was down in Olympia, and I was at a meetup for the Astrology Shitposting Association, the first regional meetup for the Pacific Northwest. And I talked to a couple strangers, and I asked them what their astrology was, and both the strangers knew their sun, moon, and rising. What that suggests to me, that was a huge rarity even 10 years ago, that people would know that. Especially two randos, like small sample size. But other people in the group also talked to people and also got their sun, moon, and rising without them having to look it up. That means more and more people are kind of connecting on to that. So what's interesting about the phase that we're kind of going into, especially when we move into like Saturn in Aquarius and Pluto in Aquarius, is we're going to see this become more of a core part of culture. And it is like this big part of Western culture, ancient and esoteric Western culture that's coming back into the mainstream, which is kind of interesting. It could just be Ruma. It could just be a Pacific Northwest thing, but it felt new and it felt pretty different. I blame myself for constantly talking about it at parties through all of my 20s and my 30s. I don't do that as much anymore. So I don't really know what else to say. I wanted to go live to kind of talk about where we are, I guess. I feel like the Shitposting Association is the core group. I'd like to turn the Shitposting Association into kind of a secret society. Not really a secret society, but a connected society where people are sharing information and sharing content, hopefully with each other long term. That would be nice. I think that it's great that people are kind of taking different aspects of New Age and poking fun at it, because definitely there's a lot of aspects of New Age belief that needs to be shit on quite a bit in a loving way. So I'm glad to see things like Love and Light shitposting. I'm really glad to see tarot shitposting doing well, because tarot is like the cheat sheet for the entire Western tradition. Libra, Scorpio, yeah. Dennis Michael Ward, you have a podcast about astrology? Yeah, you can definitely start sharing links to it. I don't think anybody would stop you from doing that. But definitely, if you message me or send me the links, I'll share them even for you if you want. But you can do that in any groups that you're with. I would do that in the association and like really try to hype it and let people know what you're doing and why you're doing it. Outrage Astro, that's cool. And honestly, you should call me sometime, and I'd love to be part of your astrological podcast. I'm trying to figure out how to do one of those myself, so maybe seeing somebody that's already got one going and talking to them would be good. Anyhow, so I feel like these groups are a way to kind of get people into some of these understandings, separate the wheat from the chaff, take the piss, but also allow kind of a welcoming environment for people to come in. And as such, it's really important not to moderate them too intensely, and not to get too far into politics on that level. So just try to connect people and let them know that these are the things that are happening. Let them know that there's a lot of different ways that people interact with these traditions. I mean, there are tons of gatekeepers for astrology, but astrology shitposting pretty much passes the gatekeepers pretty much. It doesn't really allow a lot of the old guard to control it, which is kind of good. It's the barbarians at the gates approach a little bit, but it also hopefully is a stepping stone into some of the groups that have been around for a little bit longer and doing this for a little bit longer. So, that's pretty much it. I guess my Drunkstrology is over, but it's been pretty fun. I will pull one card for the group really quick to see where we are. I got into astrology because I was dating this Cancer that had this book called The Only Astrology Book You'll Ever Need. And I was pretty skeptical, and I read the book, and in the book it said a lot about Libra that I actually connected with pretty strongly. But it also talked about how the Cancer Libra relationship would break down because it's a square relationship. So anyhow, this is one card for the groups. Okay, there's no naked people on this one. Eight of Swords. Interesting. Yeah, The Only Astrology Book You'll Ever Need is a very, very good book. Naomi's laughing because I pulled the Eight of Swords as my card at the meetup. So I don't know what it's trying to teach me, but it will eventually work out. We'll figure it out. I'm not quite sure what it is. Maybe it's because I keep sacrificing people for the nefarious aims of the groups. Who knows? Sounds about right. Anyhow, it's been good talking to you all. Have a great Friday night. Thanks for being here. Bye.